Today's training is a step-by-step process for winning as a government contractor, right? And one of the things to keep in mind as we go through today's training is I'm going to put together, push 8 hours or maybe even 40 hours worth of training into one 30-minute session. And so it gets to be a lot in there, but just go back and look at it. I'm going to give you very actionable tips, though, on how to drive forward to success, how to measure your success. I often get asked by both brand new small businesses and businesses that have been in a while, government contractors making over $20 million a year, what do I do next? I'm asked this question a lot. What do I do next? I'm at this stage. I don't know where to go or what to do next. And the answer to that question begins, in my opinion, with your goals. If you have your goals set, then you'll be able to answer that question so much easier, right? You need to set goals and you need to set a path or a roadmap to follow to achieve that goal. Process that we're going to talk about today, that is the roadmap. And process will answer the question of what do I do next, right? Every time you look at your process, you'll be able to answer that question, what do I do next? I recommend you learn from the very federal agencies you're serving, right? We all serve federal agencies and they put out these strategic plans. If you're not following me on LinkedIn and hitting that bell notification, then you're missing these notifications that I put out with strategic plans from the federal government. But when they write a strategic plan, they generally follow a framework of establishing strategic goals. In your case, it might be revenue, right? But establishing strategic goals, and then they define objectives, metrics, and outcomes, even activities that are necessary to achieve those goals or to reach those goals. And you can follow that same framework as a way to guide what you're trying to do. So if you haven't done this for your company, then how can you really know what to do next? If you haven't defined the goals or the objectives, right? The metrics and the outcomes, or the activities that you're trying to do, then how can you look in there and know what to do next? But if you have done it, it makes it easy. It doesn't have to be complicated, right? I'm not talking about creating some 20 or 80-page strategic plan. It's a pretty straightforward process for us small businesses to create this, but we need to think in that framework of objectives, metrics, outcomes, and activities. And in this training, I'm going to try to give you examples of how to create that roadmap following the process that I lay out for you. Process and numbers, having those in place, and that's what I'm going to cover today. Having those in place will really help you answer the question, what do I do next? Which is basically a step-by-step guide to success. So put OMO in the chat if you see the importance of setting objectives, metrics, and outcomes. If you don't know who I am, my name is Neil McDonnell. I want to welcome you to my federal sales training where I provide tips for success in the federal market. And I want you to succeed as you move forward. I want these tips to be easy for you to follow. I spent 20 years as a small business owner in the federal market. And since 2018, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting is not a secret. It's just a process. Before we get started, do me a favor, let buyers, let me, and let others in this community know who you are. Put your company name and your core competency. 2 or 3 words is more than enough to describe your competency and allow us to know what you do. It's funny, it just occurred to me by saying put OMO. Now I'm looking in the chat. It's like, oh my God. It's like not. Apparently I'm in a good mood today. Finally, I want to say thank you to the GovCon Chamber of Commerce sustaining members. We are not funded. We are not the federal government. We're not funded by them. We're not funded by larges. We're self-funded. We're funded by me and by you. Sustaining members are who make this training available and the handouts that we offer, including one that I'll mention a little later. So I just want to say thank you. We very much appreciate your support. Let's go ahead and dive now deeper into the process for success. Hang on, it'll be a good ride. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is the 7-step process. I'm going to show that again in a second. Many of you have seen this before, and you can never see it enough. It's a 7-step process for success, for government contracting success. But before I show it and I go in and I start talking about that as I'd like to, I just want to point out that when you have a proven process, it's repeatable, right? The process is repeatable. It's repeatable by you, that you can do the same thing over and over again because you're following a defined process. It's a documented process, and it's repeatable by your colleagues, the people within your company. So as you're doing sales, business development, capture, whatever it is, you're following a process, and that the very fact that you wrote it down and you have a process you're following makes your activities repeatable. When you do something repeatable like this, you're developing those skills and you're beginning to get into the habits that are necessary for success, and you start getting really good at it when it's repeatable. The second thing about having a proven process like the 7-step process that I'm going to show you is that it allows you to have predictable success. I used to talk about this before. You can have predictable revenue when you have a process that tells you how to get to that revenue. So process is vital for predictability within your company. It's also really helpful to be able to ask the question of, am I doing enough to win, right? Predictability is about, if I do enough of these things, then I'm going to get this result. And so you want to be able to look at a process and not only follow it, repeatability, but use it as predictability measurements, that metrics that says, am I doing enough to win? By the way, if this makes sense as you're hearing me say that, put down repeatable into the chat, or put predictable into the chat when it makes sense to you. The third thing, and last one I want to just mention, that the big value of following a process like the 7-step process is that it makes it relatable. When you talk to teaming partners, other people who are in your world, and you explain, hey, this is the process I follow, whether it's for business development, the overall sales activity of getting to know an agency and learning about opportunities, or it's capture, really going deep into one opportunity and trying to win that. Either way, it's relatable to your teaming partners. You can say, hey, this is the process I follow. Maybe you can help out in certain parts. I use this with my government customers, or not with government customers, but when I talk about working with the government, is if you understand their process, where they are on their journey and how you can help on that journey. Well, it's the same thing for you. If you have a proven process that your company follows now, then when you talk with teammates, you can say, hey, this is where we're at on our process. And many of them will say, well, shoot, I'm just going to get on your process and go along with you because we're teaming. And I like the fact that you have that process. So it's relatable as well. Let me go ahead and share my screen really quick. I want to share the 7-step process and just walk it through again really quick on that activity. So repeatable is what you see written, right? Success, when you want to aim for sales, it begins with research, understanding your agency, learning about them, learning about how they're doing business, learning about their organization, how it's structured, learning about their priorities, challenges, goals, etc. So you're doing research. And then targeting is about finding the right people. You're reaching out and you're building a list. This is just about building a list of 100 or 200 people that you can call. You don't want to be calling people like one-offs. You want to build a list of a bunch of people. So then when you move into outreach, you go heads down on making phone calls, having introduction meetings. You keep building that skill. Like I said early on, today's tip, you want to practice one skill over and over again. Don't mix these process steps in a single day. Work on one in any given day and you get good at it. So outreach is when you're really starting that process of getting into agencies and teammates and building those strategic relationships, right? Not just loose relationships, but strategic relationships are one where you care about my success and I care about yours. I'll give you a great example of a strategic relationship I heard about yesterday from one of my customers. She's up and coming and plans on getting her 8A next year. She's doing well. She just wants to wait one more year so that she's got good momentum in the agencies of choice before she gets her 8A. She was talking with somebody who's in year 5 of their 8A, and they're slowly heading towards the end. They got 4 years left in it. And so these two companies were talking about how we can work together over the next several years while you're graduating and I'm coming in, and we can help each other. That's a strategic relationship because you both care about the growth of each other. You can have that with an agency as well. That's different than just having a casual relationship where we know each other, we interact at a conference or something. There's a difference between having a lot of relationships or leads, knowing people, and having strategic relationships. Anyway, so when you follow this process, by having the strategic relationships, you're going to learn about opportunities, right? And we say they need to be slam dunk opportunities. I'm going to talk towards the end of this training today about what actual numbers you should have. But by having this in place, you begin to know what I'm trying to build. So I'm trying to build a pipeline of slam dunk opportunities. Slam dunk opportunities, if you haven't heard me say this before, are opportunities that you feel like somebody lowered the net down to about this high and they gave a basketball and said, put it in. You're slam dunking, right? It's that easy. It was written for your company. So an example, my last company, we're a SharePoint-based company. If somebody had an opportunity that was SharePoint migration, no one, not even Microsoft, who owns SharePoint, had more past performance than we did on SharePoint migrations. That's a slam dunk opportunity. Compared to if somebody said, hey, Neil, can you do Oracle? I could, but I don't know anything about it. That's way far away from slam dunk, right? And so you want to know your slam dunk opportunities. Through strategic relationships, you can identify more of them if you have a focused offer that makes it clear to you what a slam dunk opportunity is. All right, and then when you have slam dunk opportunities, then you're able to write winning proposals, because winning proposals written against slam dunk opportunities means you've written before to these opportunities. You have subject matter experts within your company. You've got past performances. This is the way to write winning proposals, is not to get really creative in your proposals, but to write proposals that actually you've done the work for, that you know how, that you have the skills and the team to do the work. And so by having slam dunk opportunities and making sure you only have slam dunk opportunities in there, it makes it really easy to start writing winning proposals. There's a whole level of capture that's not part of today that is necessary to also write winning proposals, but it begins with having a slam dunk opportunity that you're going to write to. And those obviously will lead to sales. And so that's the 7-step process in there. And the idea is, if you follow a process, you'll be able to see repeatable success in there, or the process will be repeatable. And so the results that you get out will be predictable. So repeatable, predictable, and relatable is what you want from a process. And that's why you should have a process. If you don't have a process like the one I just shared, put it in the handout, 7-step process handout, please, right? Make sure you throw please at the end. But 7-step process handout, and let me know you want that. And then when you get it, print it, put it on your wall, like some of the people I've seen in trainings recently, which I love, because then you're following a process. I took, after 20 years being a small business owner, following all these complex processes, I brought it down to just the 7 steps that are necessary for success, right? If you're following these, then it's going to lead to that success you want. But it's important you have some process, because that's the roadmap to where you're trying to go. Okay, so as you think about step-by-step process for winning, part of the value of having a process that you move forward is you can see and avoid problems when you have a process. If you don't have a process, you're going to run into all sorts of problems. So an example that I see more than anything else are 8A companies that don't follow a process, a 9-year process for how to come in, have success, prepare to grow, and graduate. And the way I can see that problem happening is when 8As come in, maybe they have some success, and then their revenue drops down after they graduate. Well, that's a predictable problem. That's a risk that we can see. And the way we avoid that is by having a process that leads them through to competitive bids and non-8A bids, so that when they're graduating, their revenue is sustainable. For you, it could be anything that's in there. But one of the first things to keep in mind, a problem that we might run into, is being reactive in the way we do business within the federal government. And the idea is that reactive versus proactive. I want you to be proactive. Proactive is having a plan, setting a goal and having a roadmap, having a plan you're going to follow that leads you to the success you want. If you don't have that in place, the problem you'll have is you'll be reactive. You'll be reactive to the contracting officers. You'll be reactive to whatever PTAC advice that's out there. You'll be reactive to colleagues who are in your company who are giving you what they think is good advice. You'll be reactive to people who just want to put you on a contract, but it's not your core competency. So now you got a contract that's outside of your slam dunk opportunities. There's all this thing that happen when you're reactive. And what you're doing is you're letting, whatever pops up kind of drive your plan as if it's a plan, instead of having a clear plan that you follow. We also call this sometimes squirrel, shiny object syndrome, this idea that you see something and you feel like it'd be good if I go that way. You want to avoid being in a position where you see a squirrel and you chase it, right? Or you see a shiny object and you move to it. Instead, when you have a process in place, you will sit there and say, that is where I want to go. This is how I'll get there, right? The last problem I want to mention that comes from not having a process, and it's a problem that you can see and avoid when you do have a process in place, is this inconsistent revenue that might happen. So for some of us, we're just not making revenue. That's one problem. But another is inconsistent revenue, where you have these heroics. And I can see this in USA Spending. Before I ever work with a company in my BD Accelerator workshop, I go into USA Spending and I look and I say, what's your money been like? And what I'm really looking for is some consistency. It doesn't even have to be a lot of growth, but just kind of consistency. The inconsistent revenue, the heroics revenue, you'll see these spikes. And inside of USA Spending, you can look at like the awards and when they were won. And what I'm looking for is consistent winning. One award every year, one award, then two awards every year, one award, two awards, three awards, four awards, some consistent growth. Not even about dollars yet, right? But just about winning. And inconsistent is when you get this pop and you get a win, and it's exciting. And then for another year or 2 years, there's nothing, right? And the company could look good because maybe they won a $10 million contract or something, or a $50 million contract, but that's not consistent. And the reason they have that inconsistent win is because they did not follow a process, right? And you have to watch out for this for yourself. If you don't follow a process, then you'll have wins that will deceive you in thinking that you're building a company that has a good foundation for predictable and repeatable wins going forward, but you really don't. If you actually looked at those inconsistent revenue pops or inconsistent wins, you might see that they came from just one-offs, not even really a lot of our efforts. Sometimes it's a relationship. I got a huge contract that came from this person liking me, and they went over here. Well, that isn't a whole lot of sales. Yes, we proved ourselves. Yes, they like us. But that's not the same as going into an agency and trying to drive opportunities to us, going after a certain amount of opportunities, which I'm about to talk about, like the numbers game, right? But when you follow a numbers game, then you have consistent revenue. When you follow a process, you can avoid problems like having inconsistent revenue or having your team, especially going after squirrels or shiny objects instead of going after a particular agency for a particular set of slam dunk opportunities. So hopefully that made sense. All of it basically is coming down to don't be reactive. When you have a process, you can be proactive following that process. So put proactive in the chat and let me track it on that. Appreciate the guys. I see the chats. I don't see them a lot, but I see it. And I'm like, hey, appreciate that. I appreciate the feedback in there because it's really helpful. And keep in mind, by the way, that's your community. If you're open to connections on LinkedIn, let people know in the chat. You can connect offline, always be nice and professional, but we're all in the government contracting space. Let's connect with each other. Okay, so the last tip I just want to give you related to today's training, is to hydrate. So hold on one second. That's right, Chris. Proactive, baby. Be proactive. Get my cheerleading out there. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk to you about as it relates to a step-by-step process for winning as a government contractor comes down to a numbers game, right? Success is a numbers game. I talk a lot about process, and process being the roadmap, but you also want to align numbers to that because it'll help you predict your success. And I'm going to talk about those numbers in a minute. But one of the things I said earlier, and I just want to remind you, is that when you follow a process like I have, where it's got targeting, outreach, relationships, etc., when you follow that, when you have a process like that, you can align numbers to those. It gives you the measurement of, am I doing enough work here? So let me give you an example of a numbers game you want to pay attention to. So the last step of the 7-step process is sales. You want to have a revenue goal. How much revenue do you want? That will lead to every other activity, right? I don't mean that your company is only driven by revenue if you have a revenue goal, but you can't just have a people's goal or I want to do good work goal, right? Those require in a for-profit business revenue. So there's nothing wrong with us wanting to make money. So we need to know, how much money do you want to make in 2023, 2024, 2025? When you set those numbers, that's your goal. Then you'll be able to do that OMO, right? Objectives, metrics, outcomes, the activities. And so you want to set revenue targets or goals that are out there. An example that I use for goals, it might be something as flat as an annual revenue goal. By the end of 2023, I want to make $2 million or $5 million. It might be a run rate. It might say by the end of 2023, I want to be at a $2 million run rate. And the difference between a revenue target of $2 million for 2023 and a run rate is that revenue target means I'll report $2 million in taxes to the government for 2023. But a run rate means by the time I get to December, I want to be pulling in basically 180,000 or something a month, which will lead me to being a $2 million company. I'm at a $2 million run rate, right? I don't know if those are accounting terms, but that's the term I use, is run rate, because that's the number I actually care about. Is I'm trying to get to that stage and I'm growing that number consistently. That's more important to me, that month after month revenue is more important to me actually than the annual. Separate conversation. So you can have those kind of goals, target numbers, which are revenue goals based on run rate or total revenue recognized in a year. Or you can have a sales goal, right? I want to have this much sales. And that's really important for me because I might sit there and say, look, we're doing fine right now, but I want to be looking at 2024. 2024, I have this revenue goal, which means for 2023, I have this sales goal. I'm trying to establish a sales goal. And this goes into that second number that you want. So if you have a revenue goal, then you can begin to identify a sales goal. What is the sales goal that I have to achieve for this year? If I'm trying to get, let's say $1 million, I want to be $1 million revenue this year in 2023 and 2024, I want to grow by 50% or 100%, to 2 million. Well, that means if I'm just starting at zero, that means I need $1 million for this year and 2 million for next year. So my sales goal is 3 million. I need to make $3 million in sales. And work with me here for a second because it's a numbers game. And I wrote this down in a different training where I actually have a whole handout on this. You can ask me for that, but a handout that breaks down the numbers. But the idea is when you're looking at a sales goal, right? This goes into your pipeline. This goes into the 7-step process. If you think about your sales goal, let's say is $3 million, then you now have a proposal goal. How much value are you writing proposals to? So I use a win rate of 25%. If I want to make, and let's go back to $1 million. If I want to make $1 million in revenue, then my sales goal is $1 million in revenue. My sales goal is $1 million. Then I need to submit $4 million in proposal value to the government. What I mean by that is if I have a 25% win rate on my proposals, I send a proposal to the government, 4 proposals, 1 out of every 4 wins. That means if I want 1 million, I got to submit 4 million out there. Hopefully that makes sense. Your number could be higher. Mine was higher. It never should be lower. If it's lower, you're doing something wrong in the process, and just talk to somebody like me, your P-Tech or other consultants out there. Somebody will help you figure out where you maybe are going a little wrong on proposals. But you should be able to win 1 out of every 4 proposals you submit. I'm not trying to get into today, by the way, the nitty gritty of the numbers, but just that easy number. If I have a $1 million sales goal, then my proposal goal is $4 million going out the door. And those have to be 4 separate proposals at $1 million each. Those numbers vary depending on what you're doing, et cetera. But the whole point of it is you're backing it up, right? If the 7-step process has sales as step number 7, step number 6 is proposals. That's 4 proposals for every 1, 4 million for 1 million. Then you need to submit. Then in order for you to have that, then you need to have opportunities in your pipeline. First and foremost, they must be slam dunk opportunities, but you need to have a number on that. And this goes back to if you have a process, then you can put numbers on every step of the 7-step process. So for the pipeline, I would look at this and say 2 out of every 3 opportunities that are in my pipeline are going to end up as a proposal going out the door. What I mean by this is every 3 proposals I have in there, one of them I'm going to abandon for whatever reason, or the government is going to abandon or delay, et cetera. And only 2 of them are going to go out at the door as a proposal in any predictable way. And so I'm just saying have 50% more proposals in the pipeline. You can do this on value. I also like doing it on just sheer numbers of opportunities that are going out. And when I say a proposal, by the way, I don't just mean prime contract. It could be subcontract, prime. It doesn't matter. Money's money. But you need to be on a proposal going out the door, whether it's a prime sending it out the door or you sending it out the door. In order to have that 25% win rate, you must have 4 proposals in order to get the 1 win. And what is that? I'm losing my math, but you need a lot more than that in opportunities. So anyways, the whole idea behind this is, as you're moving forward and you're trying to determine how you can achieve success, I want you to just remember this one slide that I showed, and I talk about it all the time, right? Every one of the steps of this process, you should have a number, including how many strategic relationships do I have? How many people are my calling outreach every single day, week, month? How many people do I have in a targeted list? Our number is always 100 fresh people in there that I should be calling, right? Having those numbers in will let you understand it. And then the research comes down to how many people how many entities are we researching? Whether it's a teaming partner like Booz Allen or whether it's an agency like the Army, each one of these steps will have a number. And when you start looking at the process and putting a number on that, you can measure your success as you move forward. So hopefully that made sense. It's a numbers game as you go forward, and it's really important that you just track on that. You can definitely have the success that you want for yourself and for your company. You just have to follow a proven process like the one I just laid out for you, right? When you do, you're going to have that repeatable, predictable success, and that's what I want for you. If you found today's training valuable, do me a favor, become a sustaining member of the GovCon Chamber. Help others benefit through your support. If your company is struggling to start and build relationships with federal buyers in particular and teammates, consider my 90-day business development accelerator workshop. In the BD workshop, that's exactly what we help people do. So just reach out to me on LinkedIn if you want help on that. And then as we're going into the weekend, remember, government contracting is not a secret. It is just a process. In this case, a 7-step process. I'll see you in the next training.